Awesome. Good morning, folks. Thank you for joining us. Give us 10, 15 more seconds, see if a few more folks join. But while that's happening, I can go ahead and get started with a few introductory slides here. Brian, would you mind flipping over to, yeah, perfect, the title slide. So thank you folks for joining us today for the value of becoming a certified energy analyst. We have Brian Selby here with KBAC, the California Association of Building Energy Consultants, and many more endeavors that Brian is working on and can share about with you. So we'll talk a bit about what a certified energy analyst is and energy modeling and some of the importance for meeting our state codes and why it may be of value to you in your career as well. And before we dive into that, I will get a few housekeeping slides going. So you could switch to the next slide, Brian. All right, so just a little Zoom orientation. Sure, we're all on Zoom a lot these days or familiar, but we do ask to make sure that your full name or like first name, last initial is displayed. This helps us take attendance or get any learning units out to you as well. We do ask that you mute yourself upon joining, but Brian does encourage some questions and verbal participation too. So he may indicate that you can ask some questions or participate as well during today's training. We also have the chat, so you can share questions or comments during the training directly in the chat or ask questions that way. And then this session maybe is being recorded actually, so we'll be able to share the recording out with you after as well. Next slide. Perfect. You can keep moving past that. I always forget those little ones are there.
Right.
All right, so just a quick background. So my name is Sean Burns. If I did not introduce myself already, I'm with the Tri-County Regional Energy Network, or 3CREN. I'm actually here in the county of Santa Barbara. And we work with the county of San Luis Obispo and the county of Ventura to deliver some energy efficiency programming in our region. So free programs for all building professionals and households in the Central Coast region. And 3CREN is funded by ratepayer dollars. We collect the public goods charge on everyone's utility bill. We get to collect some of those funds from the state and return them back to our region. So there's no cost to the folks that we get to serve on the Central Coast and bring some of those dollars back to this area, which has historically missed out on some of those funds. Perfect. Next slide. As a quick reminder, you may already be familiar, but we do have 3 programs. Our Energy Code Connect program, which serves all building professionals with accredited courses, quarterly forums on different energy code topics, and a energy code coach service with live representatives able to answer your questions about the energy code. We also have building performance training, which serves new and current building industry professionals with more technical training relating to building science and also some soft skills to help grow or market your business in this space as well. Finally, our home energy savings program incentivizes contractors and educates consumers on energy efficiency upgrades and offers support through rebates. Perfect. Next slide. And mentioned the Energy Code Coach service earlier. We do have a new way to reach that service with a texting option now available. So you can quickly text an energy code question, snap a picture of a document or a form you're looking at to send that in, and our team will respond to those questions within 2 hours during normal business days, so Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. That number is the same as the number you might call already. So I'll put more information in the chat during today's training. All right, next slide. And I think I'm the only 3CREN staff member here today, but feel free to reach out to me, chat me directly if you have any questions. My email will be up in the slides later. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to me as well. Perfect. And the next slide. And with that, I will hand it over to Brian Selby, who will be leading us through today's training. So, Brian, thank you so much for being with us and happy to get started.
Great. Thank you, Sean. I really appreciate this opportunity that 3C Ren has put together to help share a little bit more about the value of becoming a CEA or Certified Energy Analyst. Just show of hands out there. Maybe you have the little icon tool. How many of you have heard about the CEA program or the Certified Energy Analyst program? So let me know. The hand's good. Claudia has heard about it. Good. Well, I want to share a little bit more about this and what the program is about and what the value is for our building industry. But before I do that, I want to just give a little bit of background on myself. I've been an energy consultant for a few years now. Started in the mid 1980s, about 85, 86. I can't really remember the specifics dates when I became an energy consultant, but I started doing it out of necessity. Back then, our energy code had been enforced for several years, but our county, our government and our building department just started enforcing it in our area. So at the time I was a building designer doing drafting, residential building design. And my boss came to me and said, hey, the energy code is being enforced here in this county and I need you to learn it. And back then, we had a pretty simplified energy code. The manuals and code itself were pretty, easy to digest for the most part, but we didn't have these wonderful programs and trainings and all that happening back then. So I kind of had to do it the hard way. I feel like these days we've got a lot more training, a lot more resources available to folks to help understand and apply our energy code. But in addition to being an energy consultant and a building designer, I'm also a HERS rater. No longer practicing HERS rater, but I do maintain my certification there. But enough about myself. I want to get into our topic today, the value of becoming a certified energy analyst. A couple of things about our goals today. Obviously, I want you to have a basic understanding of the roles and responsibilities a person would have for documenting compliance with our energy code. When I talk about energy code, you might hear it referred to as the energy standards, the Bs, building energy efficiency standards, Title 24, Part 6. Some people just refer to it as Title 24, but specifically, we're talking about a particular portion of our California building code, which is all the building codes under Title 24, but we're specifically talking about Part 6 right now. Obviously, we want you to understand the benefits, pathways, and minimum qualifications to become a CEA. Now, I'm going to go into some detail today about, the steps that you would need to take, types of training that you would benefit from, and what taking the exam and becoming certified takes. So third point there, understand the importance and accuracy of energy modeling and compliance with our energy code. When I talk about energy modeling, it's specifically modeling a building and simulating the energy usage of that building over a year's time. And with our energy code, we have a budget. We can only spend so much energy on our buildings, various types of buildings. And we're going to compare what our proposed energy budget is to what our baseline or our budget is. So obviously, we spend more money than we make, we're going to be at a deficit. Our energy is the same way. So we're going to, if you can think of it in those terms, it will make a lot of sense. And lastly, understanding what's being done to elevate this role of a CEA, similar to if you've heard of a HERS rater, which I mentioned earlier, or acceptance test technician for the non-residential portion of the code. So lots of great things in here today. I want to encourage questions. If you're unfamiliar with some of the terminology that I use, let me know. I'm happy to explain it, give you a little bit more background about it. And if you have any specific questions that I may need to clarify, feel free to ask. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat window too. I know Sean's monitoring that and let me know if there's any specific questions coming up. But if you feel comfortable to unmute yourself and want to ask a question, feel free to. So I think we have plenty of time today to dive into some stuff. So great. Without further ado, let's move on here in our presentation. Now, there are some challenges with our energy code. As you may be aware, our energy code is regulated at the state level. It's part of our building code. Buildings must be compliant with their energy code if they are being regulated. Now, California is the leader in energy efficiency in our nation. The first to have energy efficiency standards in our country, first to have PV system or photovoltaic system electric generation requirements. We lead the nation. So on that note, we are on the bleeding edge of energy efficiency, meaning that it's going to cost us something. It's going to be difficult. Our code is regulated by the Warren-Alquist Act. And what that says is that we need to have a code that is looked at and updated on a 3-year cycle. So every 3 years, our code becomes more stringent. And it's not just an arbitrary stringency. It has to be cost effective, meaning that the amount of the cost is for the specific feature being regulated has to pay for itself over a period of time. And that period of time changes depending on the type of feature and the type of occupancy that it's used for, anywhere from 15 to 30 year payback period. So now, as the code gets more stringent, compliance with those codes becomes more complicated. And we're at a point now where we have a very complicated energy code. And we're going to get into a little bit of the detail of the different pathways or methods that people would comply with their energy code. So more to come on that. Since our energy savings goals are dependent upon compliance with those codes, we need to make sure that those goals are achievable, or that we're doing the best we can to ensure that projects can actually achieve those energy savings that have been set by the state. So in the intent of the code, I think we're doing pretty well. As far as the specific application, I think there's some room for improvement. So that's why we have programs such as 3C REN to bring back those dollars into your territory and invest in the industry and make our homes, our buildings more energy efficient. So a little bit of background about energy consulting. I call this Energy Consulting 101. There's a whole bunch more to energy consulting than just this, but I wanted to cover some of the definitions here. If you're involved in the compliance process with our energy code, there's a term called a documentation author. Now, this is the person who prepares the energy code compliance documents. They could be prescriptive forms, they could be certificates of compliance, meaning that's a design document. It could be a certificate of installation, essentially saying this is actually what I installed, compared to that design document. And then there's certificates of verification or acceptance. And usually those are prepared by the trained certified individuals for those particular verifications. All of those forms must have a documentation author. There's no special requirements to be a documentation author. You can fill out forms and do most anything you like. Now, the term energy consultant, it's kind of loosely, defined here, but this is the person that not only performs the role of the documentation author, but they're also doing other things. This is the person that, looks at your project, determines what's the best approach for determining or documenting compliance with our energy code, looking at all the features and measures, and then making recommendations so that that project not only meets the code, but it's cost effective, it's feasible, it's what the client is comfortable with building. So these are typically these documents typically come in the form of a certificate of compliance. Now, that's not the limit of an energy consultant's role, but determining compliance with our energy code largely depends on that either CF1R, that's a residential certificate of compliance, or an NRCC document, which is a non-residential certificate of compliance. So these are the primary forms that initiate the project's compliance with our energy code. So subtle differences between these two. Some documentation authors are not energy consultants, but all energy consultants are documentation authors. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, our industry of energy consultants, they do play a very important role in the compliance with our energy code. Really what their job is to communicate to the rest of the design team, the construction team, the building departments, anybody else who is involved in verifying or ensuring that compliance with our energy code has been met for a particular project. So I've listed a bunch of different important roles that those play, and you can read through these. I'll highlight a few of these, but essentially that energy consultants, the first line of duty here is to assess the project and determine best how to apply the energy code requirements. We have various pathways. We have a prescriptive pathway, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. And we have a performance pathway that's using the modeling software and simulating that energy usage. Both of those come with different values or different motivations to use a particular pathway. Some pathways are not able to be used because of the design or scope of work of the project. So it's the important step that that energy consultant does to make sure that the appropriate pathway is used for documenting compliance. I'm going to talk a minute about mandatory measures, but really it's important that the energy consultant understands what requirements must be met always, regardless. Meaning that if you have a certain feature in your building, and if it's a mandatory requirement that a minimum level of efficiency is set, that those be met. Those can't be traded off. Those can't be performanced away. They just always have to be met. So in some cases, it's the energy consultant's responsibility to ensure that those are done, regardless of what the compliance software says has been done. In many cases, the software doesn't error check for mandatory requirements, and I'll get into that in a little bit, but they must always be met. We talked about the different ways, different pathways that compliance is met, and determining the best, most cost-effective approach based on the scope of work, the building type, and what the features are in that particular project. So there's roles for, or and necessity for that energy consultant to make recommendations on various third-party verifications, like a HERS verification may be used for a compliance credit, meaning that you're crediting your proposed design versus penalizing your proposed design. We'll talk about that a little bit more too, but you can see on the right-hand column there, making sure that all of the project-specific requirements are communicated to the design team and to the builders. Oftentimes this information gets overlooked and kind of swept under the carpet, and by the time the information gets out to the field for installation, oftentimes it's hard for those installers to understand the compliance documentation and where to find specific requirements. So it's really important that energy consultants communicate that, so that that assurance of compliance with their energy code has been met. So document registration, talk a little bit about that. We have a requirement with our energy code for various project types. If there's a HERS verification or a third-party verification that needs to be done on site, that means that all of the compliance documentation has to be registered and signed off by a specific person. That's called the responsible person. That's the person that's saying, okay, I'm the one that taking responsibility to ensure that all of these requirements on this certificate of compliance is met out in the field. So, and then a couple of things as far as resolving any issues with plan check comments or building inspection comments regarding what features are being installed in the building. And lastly, resolve any as-built changes to a particular project. It's very common that our residential buildings, they change when the architect or designer finishes a set of plans and they get out to start building this project. Oftentimes you'll find that there are substitutions or value added engineering on site that may not be in parallel with what the compliance documentation says. So it's important that these issues get resolved. So it's a lot of information. I know I'm kind of hitting you with a fire hose here, but there are a lot of really important steps that energy consultants must take. So that's why we're sharing this with you, and hopefully building that value or building that argument up for having a trained, certified workforce providing this documentation versus just anybody off the street. So now this compliance process that I'm talking about, it's a little complicated, but it's definitely not rocket science here. We've got a little illustration on the right-hand side just to kind of describe the process. It's kind of circular. We start at that design piece of pie, that slice in the upper right-hand corner. And really the goal here is to document what the proposed design, the building energy usage is compared to the budget, right? So there's a process where the energy consultant or the documentation author works with the builder designer to ensure that everything's meeting our energy code. Once that's done, the certificate of compliance is generated, and that is submitted along with the plans and other specifications to the building department. And we call that the AHJ, or authority having jurisdiction. In many cases, it's that plan check is being done in the building department. Some cases they might sub that role out to an outside plan check agency, and they're the ones taking responsibility for plan checking that project. Once that goes through the plan check, there may be some corrections necessary, and we really strongly encourage that energy consultant work with the plans examiner to make sure that everything is correct. In some cases, there may be additional documentation needs to be done to the plans and to coordinate the energy code compliance documentation with the information on the plans. So sometimes that's not right. But once those are all resolved, then the building department issues a permit, the builder starts building the project, and then the verification process steps in. Once a feature is installed, it needs to be documented, meaning that certificate of installation needs to be completed. And essentially what they're doing is just proving to the building inspector that what was promised to be installed on the certificate of compliance actually did get installed via the certificate of installation. Now, there are certain features or building components in our various building types in California that require a third-party inspector to come out and verify. Those are features like duct leakage testing, airflow and fan efficacy testing, refrigerant charge verification, QII, or quality insulation installation. These are all third-party inspections that must be done and coordinated with the builder and the building department to make sure that those are done. Once that's all complete, that loop is done, then the building department issues a certificate of occupancy. And basically ensuring that everything has been met. In a perfect world, that happens without too many issues. In reality, there are a lot of things that can come up during construction that may alter or differ the compliance with our energy code. Therefore, it's important that energy consultants are very experienced with construction practices, technology that is used in our buildings, as well as an understanding and good working knowledge of our energy code. So how are we doing question wise? Anything come up, Sean, so far?
No questions quite yet. But I kind of have one. So, I mean, this compliance process kind of explains it, but an energy consultant is part of a project from day one, essentially, is what I'm getting to.
Yep. And that's a really good point, Sean. It's important that the energy consultant be engaged early in the design process. The risk of engaging, having the architect, designer, the person drawing the plans, engage with an energy consultant late in the process, meaning that they might be submitting a set of plans on Friday and they call you on Monday and say, I need some Title 24 documentation. The risk is that the impact of what's required might change the design. So we highly recommend that that energy consultants be engaged early. That's just a behavior issue. A lot of people don't think of meeting our energy code requirements until the very end. And as our energy code has gotten more stringent, that's more and more important. So yeah, so good question, Sean. Thank you.
Gotcha.
All right. I talked earlier about mandatory measures. Mandatory measures are those applicable features, requirements within our energy code that if you have a particular feature that is a mandatory requirement, then those must be met. There are no provisions to trade those away by using a more efficient feature somewhere else. But you can exceed those requirements. Essentially, the mandatory requirements are bare minimum requirements. And those generally focus on insulation levels. Here in California, we saw the 2019 code increase the minimum insulation levels in our exterior walls. They went from an R19 cavity insulation, that's a nominal R value. There is an equivalent U factor for that particular assembly, but went from a minimum of R19 to an R20. Well, if you're familiar with building materials and standard practices, they don't necessarily make an R20 insulation. Typically, that's an R21 high density fiberglass bat, or there are other ways to achieve that minimum insulation. But we have these minimum requirements to ensure that those buildings, the envelopes of those buildings are built to a minimum standard. It's tough, or it's very infrequent for a building to go through and make improvements on the envelope. Generally speaking, those envelope measures are built for the life cycle of the building, typically a 30-year life cycle, maybe more. You know, our buildings are getting better, but if we don't set minimum requirements, that means that our building envelopes may be insufficient when we start layering on more efficient technology like heat pumps and heat pump water heaters and other efficiency mechanical systems. So minimum insulation levels are set by our energy code standards. Of course, our minimum equipment efficiencies are also set. Now, our energy code regulates our buildings. We have an appliance efficiency regulation that sets the minimum efficiency of our equipment or appliances that are installed in our buildings and other features. Those are all fall under the Title 20 appliance efficiency regulations. And those are referenced by our building energy efficiency code, Title 24, Part 6. So In the event that the federal government has a requirement for a particular piece of equipment, then California is limited on what it can require, meaning that we can't be more stringent than what the federal requirement is. Therefore, if the federal requirement is set for a particular piece of equipment, for example, a gas furnace. Gas furnace has a minimum efficiency of an 80% AFUE, or annual fuel utilization efficiency. Therefore, California can't require anything more stringent, but it can increase the stringency of the code, therefore drive particular equipment to higher performance standards. So, but the minimum requirement is set by a federal government. And in the event that the federal government doesn't have a requirement, then the state can make their own requirement for those appliances. HVAC distribution systems and controls, when we're talking about residential buildings, there are certain mandatory features. I rattled a few off earlier. Mandatory duct leakage testing, meaning that we set a minimum leakage factor for air distribution for central HVAC systems. Likewise, we also have minimum airflow requirements, 350 CFM per ton nominal tonnage of our air conditioning equipment, as well as fan efficacy, meaning that that supply fan has to operate at a certain efficiency level. And those are generally in watts per CFM of airflow. So there's a balancing act here. So those are mandatory requirements. There are some features that are prescriptive requirements, some features that are compliance credits when we're dealing with the performance approach, but minimum mandatory requirements must always be met on all projects. We've got ventilation requirements to deal with indoor air quality. Now, these aren't energy saving measures. These are life-saving measures. And in this case, indoor air quality is a much higher priority than saving energy, making sure that we have enough fresh air entering our buildings, diluting any contaminants within our closed spaces. So very important that those are met. Likewise, all of the lighting requirements for our residential buildings are all regulated as a mandatory requirement. Not so true with our non-residential buildings. We do have some mandatory efficacy requirements for lighting, as well as control requirements for our commercial spaces. So, and then lastly, our solar ready requirements. Those are bare minimum requirements to ensure that there's adequate space on the roof for the future installation of solar if they don't qualify to install it, or they don't have to install it based on an exception. With our residential energy code, the 2019 energy code made PV systems prescriptively required. First time in our nation's history that a electric generation or photovoltaic electric generation requirement has been made. Now, those aren't mandatory requirements. Those are prescriptive requirements. We'll talk about those on the next slide. Now, when I talk about the prescriptive approach, it's just that. There is a prescribed features, minimum efficiency requirements for all of the building envelope features. When I say envelope, I'm talking about roofs, ceilings, walls, floors, windows, doors, anything that defines the outside of that envelope of the building. That would be here listed on our prescriptive requirements. Now, it also has mechanical system requirements incorporated in here, and we'll get to those in a minute. But this approach is very simple, but it's inflexible, meaning that you really only have a choice of meeting the requirement. If you can't meet the requirement, or the scope of work in your project doesn't allow you to meet that requirement, then you can't use the prescriptive approach. So all of these requirements are based on cost-effective features for each climate zone. Now, you'll notice here on the right-hand side, I've got a table. This is table 150.1a. It's found in subchapter 8 of our energy code. And this is the prescriptive table for single family residential buildings. You'll see that there are 16 climate zones across the top, and oops, sorry about that. All of those 16 climate zones represent regions in California with a specific weather pattern, meaning that they all have, if you're in climate zone 1, which happens to be the northwestern coast of California. So think of Eureka area, Crescent City, all those areas up on the north coast of California. It's a pretty cold climate. If you would compare that to, let's say, Fresno, California, climate zone 13. Fresno is a much hotter location, and the requirements for Fresno are going to differ greatly from the requirements from Eureka, meaning that Fresno is pretty much a cooling dominant climate zone, meaning that you're going to see a lot of hot summers, a lot of high energy demand for cooling in that region. Whereas up in Eureka, you may have times during the summer that your heating system is calling for heat to supply there. So they're drastically different. And we have 16 very clear designated climate zones in California. Now, there are microclimates within that, and they kind of vary, but those are all taken into consideration. So each of these requirements are specifically tailored to a climate zone and a region to be the most cost-effective features for that particular region. Now, as you can gather, that some of these requirements may be a little bit restrictive on a design, meaning that, well, maybe if I have a ceiling insulation requirement as well as a below roof deck requirement in a building, but I'm not building a building with an attic. I'm building a house with a rafter roof. Well, unfortunately, you cannot comply prescriptively with that particular building feature or strategy because they don't have a prescriptive requirement. So, which is not a big deal. We're going to get into the performance approach next. We're going to talk about some of the flexibility that it has. But in order for a building to be compliant using the prescriptive approach, it must meet all of the prescriptive features or the requirements for that climate zone in order to comply. Very simple. But as you know, we discussed or covering with you, if you can't meet one of them, and you can with all of them, you can't use that approach. You have to use the performance approach. Now, when we're talking about performance approach, that's the building modeling, using software program to simulate the building energy usage, not only of what you're proposing to build, but also the baseline building. That baseline budget for that performance approach is based on the prescriptive requirements. Essentially, it's the same building that you're proposing to build with all those prescriptive requirements. So essentially, our prescriptive approach sets the baseline for the performance approach. And as long as you can prove that your building meets that that energy budget or is better, meaning that you're using less energy, then the project complies. And the delta, the difference between what you're proposing, that energy use, and what you're required to meet is the compliance margin. And that's typically represented in two different types of metrics. And I'll get into that in just a minute. But just understand that our energy code deals with energy in a common unit. That common unit really depends on what type of project, but it could either be time dependent valuation or TDV. You might have heard that word. In current code cycles, the energy code has introduced what's called an energy design rating. It's kind of like a miles per gallon sticker on a car. That way you can compare the energy design rating of a particular building to another building, and it's relative in terms. So there's a couple of different metrics that are used in the performance approach. So, but just understand that the prescriptive requirements set the budget for the performance approach. Good. How are we doing on questions? Anything coming in so far?
Yeah, one question from Javier, going back a few slides, kind of to the same process of energy consulting. Um, Javier asked, are HERS raters also involved early in a project?
Yeah, that's a great question, Javier. And in my belief, yes, I think a HERS rater should be engaged early on in the process, meaning that once the project has a permit and they're going out to build, the HERS rater should be up to speed with what the requirements are in the schedule as far as making inspections. There's one particular HERS measure or HERS feature that is very important. And in our current code, it has become a prescriptive requirement. It's called QII, or Quality Insulation Installation. And it's a process of the HERS rater going out and inspecting at various periods or various status or steps in the construction process to ensure that first the air sealing measures that are required have been met, meaning that the house has to be sealed up. Any penetration through an exterior wall, floor, or ceiling needs to be sealed. Then once those are met, another inspection for the actual installation of the insulation and make sure that it meets minimum compression or gaps between that and the framing member or the siding or the air barrier on the inside to ensure that it's done right. Kind of silly that we have to provide an extra inspection to ensure that it's installed correctly. But in many cases, insulation is poorly installed and derates the value or its ability to resist heat transfer. So it's important. Now, because it's prescriptively required, if a particular project requires QII, and most of them do these days, if the installer forgets to engage with that HERS rater early, and they go ahead and install all the insulation and they put the drywall up, well, there's no way to go back other than tearing all the drywall out, tearing all the insulation out, and starting over to do that verification. So, and in many cases, it's too late, and the value of the efficiency of that particular measure is so high that there's not much available to trade that off to fix the problem that was caused by the builder didn't engage early enough with that HERS rater. So yes, to answer your question, I highly recommend that builders engage with HERS raters early on in the process, just for that very reason. Several other reasons why. They can also provide some really good insight into saving time, making sure that that project stays on track and meeting the requirements. So let me know if there's any follow-up questions on that, Javier. So, okay, back to our performance approach. This approach is predominantly used for new construction projects, as well as more complex addition or alteration projects. You can see our timeline or our flow chart here on the right-hand side. Really starts with a project assessment, and that's what we teach with becoming a CEA, is making sure that you understand the project, the scope of work, and that you apply the appropriate pathways to determining compliance, whether it be prescriptive or performance, and making making sure that the project it meets those requirements. So next, the process, and this is a really refined process. I know I'm kind of going over this quickly here, but once the project assessment is done, looking at doing takeoffs, gathering information from the plans, the specifications from your client to document those energy features on the building. Once that information is collected, that information is like square footage of conditioned floor area, or CFA, square footage of walls, by orientation, windows by orientation, all of our mechanical system information, duct distribution, if there are those in the project, and water heating and the distribution for that. So all that information, gathering, we call it doing a takeoff, gathering that information, organizing in fashion that we can input into our compliance software. That's where we're actually using the either the Energy Commission's public domain software called CBEC Res. By the way, it's free software. You can download that. You can Google search CBECC-RES, CBEC Res, and you can play with the software. You can see how models are built, the structure, but essentially what the energy consultant is doing is taking all that information from the plans and specifications and entering that to characterize what the proposed design of that building is going to be. That includes all of the features that I was talking about, as well as the performance values or assemblies for those particular features. Walls are regulated by U factor. If you don't understand that term, you might understand R value of insulation. R value is the ability for that particular product, typically insulation, to resist heat transfer, right? Where U factor is the inverse. It's the rate in which heat transfers through a product. So R value, the higher the R value, the better insulation properties it has, the higher resistance to heat transfer. Where U factor is the rate, the lower the U factor, the better thermal characteristics that particular assembly has to resist heat transfer. So both of them are well, I would say they're reciprocals, meaning that they're the opposites. So higher the R value, the lower the U factor, the better the thermal performance. So those types of information. Windows perform based on a U factor, the rate at which heat transfers through that fenestration or window product, and solar heat gain coefficient, the amount of heat causing light that actually is transmitted through that window and enters our building. In some cases, you want a lot of heat causing light. If you're in climate zone 1, you want that sun to heat up your buildings. If you're in climate zone 13, 14, maybe 15 out in the desert, you want to resist or filter out that heat causing light. You want a really low solar heat gain coefficient. So all of these inputs are really designed to help the software simulate the energy usage of that building. Once that the inputs have been made into the compliance software, then you hit the analyze button, and that's really where your reality check comes in. It's going to analyze the proposed building, compare it to the baseline or the prescriptive requirements for that building, and determine whether or not the building's in compliance. And if it is, the magnitude of compliance better than our standard design. And that's our compliance margin. The greater the compliance margin, the greater efficiency of the building. So now, oftentimes, when I'm entering information, my fingers don't push the buttons that my brain is thinking they're pushing. And there are particular errors that might be interjected into that software. So being a CEA or certified energy analyst, we really focus in on documentation accuracy, meaning that did you take that information off the set of plans correctly? Did you enter it into the compliance software correctly? So we have a process that we call, doing that review of the compliance documentation that ensures that the compliance documentation is accurate. That's not always the standard practice for energy consultants, but for a CEA, definitely standard practice to error check those reports to make sure that not only is the information correct, but is it feasible? Is it buildable out in the field? So, and in those situations where projects, maybe the as designed features don't comply, or maybe the project needs to meet an above code requirement, like a reach code. In that case, making recommendations to either improve the project's efficiency to meet compliance or to exceed compliance to meet a reach code is really important. And that's where knowledge of the energy code comes in, experience with buildings and the features and technology that's used in our buildings. So that's when those recommendations come in. So that's the performance approach, at least the process that's involved in it. Obviously, there's a lot more going on in our buildings. Each one of these features, can have a tremendous amount of variables, meaning that there might be 20 different viable options to build an exterior wall. Well, depending on the proposed design, there may be 2 or 3 options, and understanding what the impacts of those options may have on your client is important. I haven't met a client yet that cost is not a factor. Cost is always a factor in building projects. And if we make recommendations that make our clients spend a lot more money, that may hurt their bottom line. And they're looking for a more cost-effective option. In some cases, it's not possible because of our minimum mandatory requirements to trade off certain features. But generally speaking, with the performance approach, we can trade off prescriptive requirements, meaning that we don't have to meet every single prescriptive requirement as long as our overall budget of our proposed design is equal to or less than what the budget is for our standard design, which, remember, is based on the prescriptive requirements. So I see Claudia has a question. Who are your clients? Contractors, developers, homeowners, enforcement agencies? I would say all of those except the last one. My clients would be builders, developers, sometimes homeowners, deal with a lot of those. Anybody who is building a building in California that would fall under regulation of Title 24, Part 6. Generally speaking, any space that's conditioned, it's a residential building, a multifamily building, a commercial building. There are only a few occupancy types that are not covered by our energy code. And those are a couple of the institutional style occupancies. But we're seeing our energy code starting to creep into that I occupancy category. So essentially saying anybody who's building a building would be the client, but primarily architects, engineers, contractors, developers, so forth. So good question, Claudia. Thank you for that. So all that information, all the steps to do a performance analysis and document complaints using the performance approach takes a lot of knowledge and skill in running that software. Now, it may shock you, but currently there are no energy code requirements for individuals to obtain special training or certification to use this approach. Our energy code says you can download the free software, or you can buy the paid software and call yourself an energy consultant. And that's great. I love it because we have such a need for people in this realm. There's a pretty high demand. Just for example, I was at our industries convention or conference a couple of weeks ago, and somebody brought up the fact that we have a lot of folks that are training to become a CEA, and the person asked the audience, there was nearly 200 people in the audience, how many of you businesses need to hire an energy consultant now? And about 20 hands raised, and I was blown away about how much a demand is out there. But they're looking for trained, certified folks. They want people who have an understanding of the energy code, have a working knowledge of the prescriptive and performance approach and how to apply that. So there is a need out there. And even though there isn't a certification requirement yet, we hope that there will be soon. there is a need to train and certify individuals for this type of work. All right, now a couple things we know about our energy code here that we've covered earlier. Energy code requirements are likely to get more stringent, and with stringency, history has proven that it gets more complicated the more stringent we get with codes. So, and that's by design. Our energy code is really striving to reduce not only peak energy usage, meaning that energy use during a really hot time of year, summer, in the late afternoon, it puts a strain on our grid, and we don't necessarily always have enough energy to go around economically. So our energy codes really whittle away at that peak energy. Our codes are now starting to focus in on decarbonization, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, reducing the need and requirement for fossil fuels. So that adds complexity to our compliance process. So, and we talked about this earlier, energy saving goals by the state. You can see the handouts that the Energy Commission puts together there on the right. These are handouts that were developed for the 2019 Energy Code. And you see the building energy efficiency standards for residential buildings is on track to save roughly $19,000 over the 30-year mortgage of a house. And they estimated those initial costs to meet those increased stringency measures cost, $9,500 to $10,000 more on a house. That means that those measures are going to pay for themselves over a long period of time. Well, those are great savings claims, and it looks great on paper, but if those goals aren't actually being met in the field, meaning that the installed features of those buildings are, if they're not meeting our energy code requirements, that means we're not meeting our goals. And part of ensuring that those goals are met is making sure that the compliance documentation, that certificate of compliance, is accurate and it's pointing at the right target. If you make an error on your compliance documentation, it's still going to have your proposed design and your standard design. Your standard design's the target, right? That's the budget. And if your budget is the wrong target, meaning you made an error and you have a wrong budget, then your proposed design isn't gonna work. In some cases, those errors might result in the project not complying. So it's really important that the compliance documentation be accurate. So, and then lastly, performance approach is predominantly used for compliance, which requires the special sets of skills, meaning that not only do you have to know how to use the software, you have to understand what the software is doing, what sets the baseline for compliance, what sets that budget. Understanding what's going on behind the scenes is really important, as well as understanding the energy efficiency, the concepts and principles about documenting those proposed features, understanding U factor, understanding the various performance values for windows, for our heating, cooling systems, ventilation systems, and water heating systems. So again, special set of skills that currently there are no requirements for somebody to prove that they have those skills. You can just download the software and use it. So you can see that bottom statement. While a certification program does exist in California, it's called the Certified Energy Analyst Program, and it's administered through CABEC, California Association of Building and Energy Consultants. It's not widely used to ensure that compliance has been met. Now, we're slowly changing that. We're changing the landscape of our compliance here in California. You may be familiar with REACH codes or above code requirements. I know some of the 3C REN jurisdictions have REACH codes, meaning that the Energy Commission sets the minimum requirement. That's our Title 24 Part 6 code. But each jurisdiction can apply to have an above code requirement, meaning that you have to not only meet the minimum requirements, but now you have to meet the requirements of this reach code. And in some cases, jurisdictions have adopted requirements to be a CEA, or Certified Energy Analyst, to prepare that compliance documentation. So that's how we're slowly changing our industry in ensuring that folks are trained and certified to do this type of work. Now, do we have two, what do we call this? Labeling or programs to ensure somebody's knowledge, minimum competency with our energy code. So that's done through KBEC. It has been largely supported by our statewide IOU codes and standards program. And that's the investor-owned utilities have come together, just like 3C REN collects ratepayer funds. A certain amount on each of those ratepayers goes to increasing compliance with our energy code. And one of those areas is investing in the energy consulting industry to ensure that the standard or the level of knowledge and understanding of our energy code is set at a really high bar, so that we can ensure that those savings goals can be met. So the first program, and this is our premier program, if you want to call it, is the Certified Energy Analyst. This is the highest level that you can achieve. This program obviously designed to help ensure that our energy saving goals can be met. We have a very rigorous exam process, and I'll get into that momentarily. But really, the objective with this is to set a really high knowledge, skills, and abilities level for individuals that qualify and meet all the requirements to be a CEA. And those include energy code knowledge, fundamentals about our building energy efficiency concepts, heat transfer, R value, U factor, understanding some of those principles, as well as being able to use the software and predict with a reasonable accuracy what the software is going to do with certain features. Is that going to be a penalty? Is that going to be a credit towards our meeting our budget? So the second one is called the Associate Energy Analyst. And this was developed as an accreditation program rather than a certification program, essentially accrediting those people who passed the exam, accrediting their knowledge of the energy code. It's the same exam that a certified energy analyst would take, the multiple choice exam, but this is really designed for those folks who work closely with the energy code, but not necessarily have any experience modeling projects, meaning running the simulation, the performance approach. And that would be needed to become a CEA. So two different programs, essentially both taking the same portion, the multiple choice portion of the exam, but the CEA has additional requirements, and I'll get into that in just a second. Great. Now, how to become a CEA? Here is our list of competencies. If you ever been in one of my classes about how to prepare to pass the CEA exam, we drill these home, and it's very important to have be proficient in all 5 competencies. You may be proficient in 1 or 2, and you might, fare pretty well on the multiple choice exam. But if you don't have that competency 3, competency 4, doing takeoffs, modeling projects, and you go to take the modeling portion of the exam, you may not fare so well. So the CEA candidates must pass 2 parts, a 2-part exam. The first part is a multiple choice exam. Just as it says, you've got a question, we got 4 answer choices. You choose the appropriate answer, or hopefully the correct answer. There are 50 questions that cover all 5 competencies. We have more than 50 questions in our pool or bank of questions. So it's probably 110 questions, but essentially the candidate who's taking the exam has to pass it at a certain percentage of the multiple choice exam to pass that portion and to prove that they're competent with that type of knowledge over these 5 categories. And I'll cover those categories in just a minute and explain a little bit about that. The second part of the exam is actually modeling a project. We give candidates taking the modeling portion of the exam a case study project, giving information about the project specifics. We even do the takeoffs for you. And essentially the process would be to assess the project, determine the appropriate route. In this case, it'd be a performance approach, and then model that project accurately. And that's what we're testing, is their ability to take that information and accurately model it in the compliance software. It sounds easy. If we give you all the inputs and we give you a set of plans and all the guidelines, it should be pretty simple to pass this portion of the test. Not quite so, because of all the variables. And some folks don't follow that process that we talked about, right? Going through an error checking. And it's usually those errors that pop up that make a project inaccurate. So now, to be a CEA, you have to pass not only both of these parts, but there are also experience requirements above and beyond that must be met. Now, to be an AEA, to get that accreditation, you must only pass the multiple choice portion of the exam. And as I mentioned earlier, the multiple choice portion of the exam is based on these 5 competencies. Competency 1 is our energy basics. And essentially, you're not going to find the answer to competency 1 questions from using our code book, our energy code, or the manuals, or all the other stuff. This should be knowledge that you understand, that you have from either experience in the field about energy efficiency design concepts, heat transfer, some really light-ended thermodynamics, understanding how heat is transferred through various components and different types of heat transfer, as well as building features, orientation, overhangs, shading, various passive solar design attributes of a building. Having that understanding is important. That lays the foundation of the rest of this information. So once we get into competency 2, that's our project assessment. If you look at this list of competencies, it might look really familiar with the process in which a consultant does a performance approach. You got to have a good understanding of efficiency, building terminology, various appliances and components of building structures here in California. That sets your foundation. Then moving into that project assessment, what climate zone is it in? What's the total condition floor area? What's the orientation, understanding the direction the building faces relative to true north. And being able to have a working understanding of our code so that you can apply certain requirements. And this overall scope of work is a major tool in determining how those pathways for determining compliance will work. So project assessment, moving on to takeoffs, gathering the information, knowing what information needs to be included in that energy model, what features might be required but are not documented in the model, like some of the mandatory requirements, lighting, some of the mandatory indoor air quality requirements that aren't documented. So having that understanding, and then modeling the project using the software, going through and error checking, being able to understand what the inner workings or kind of behind the curtain activity, what the software is doing is important. And then that last level is making recommendations. That's where really the energy consultant comes out in this process, is determining what is needed to either get the project to compliance or get it to the performance level that your client needs to build. So cool. Any questions come in, Sean? You still doing okay on time?
Yeah, doing okay on
Good.
time. I do not see any questions right now, though.
Great. Good. Well, don't hesitate to ask questions. You know, I'm here to share with you, and I know I talk a lot. I have a lot of information to share, but please, if there's anything that you're dying to know about energy consulting, I'm happy to elaborate more on. Now, after a CEA candidate passes both parts, the multiple choice portion of the exam and the practical, the modeling portion of the exam, in order for them to achieve that certification, they also need to provide some proof of their experience. At KBEC, we do that in a point system. In order to meet the experience qualifications, you have to have at least 100 points combined in these categories. So you must show experience as a documentation author. So a minimum of 5 projects reviewed by one of your peers who is also a CEA. They need to go through and review that. And it might be more than 5 projects, but at least 5 projects. And that would constitute half of those points. If you need to make up the other half of those points, you just need to provide more examples of your work, or you can use your education. You have a degree or various certification in a particular area that that goes along with building and construction and energy efficiency. Those can be used towards meeting those qualifications, up to half of those qualification points. So in addition to that, we have a pretty high continuing education requirement, 9 CEUs. That's 9 hours of continuing education on an annual basis. I mentioned that our energy code changes every 3 years, and it takes a lot of time to get that knowledge up to speed with the current code cycle. So we have 9 CEUs per calendar year. If you go to our conference, you can fulfill that 9 hours easily. You could actually get more than that. So, and that would be based on your certification. If you have a residential certification, you're a residential CEA, you have to have 9 CEUs for the residential certification. If you're a non-residential CEA, you must also have another 9 CEU units for that. So, and then we do have a professional practices workshop. KBEC is really strong on our code of ethics. It is really easy to game the compliance process, meaning that you can easily lie, cheat, steal your way to determine showing a project is compliant. Doesn't mean that project is compliant. It means that somebody used some unethical practices to fool the building department or somebody else into believing that the project is compliant. And we don't stand for that at KBEC. You know, becoming a CEA sets a minimum level of ethics, meaning that to the best of your ability, you need to document what's true and accurate about that project and not be tempted by cutting corners or cheating on the compliance process. So I won't get into too much of that. Really haven't found too many folks really feel the desire to cheat after they become a CEA. Becoming a CEA might change some of their habits for documenting projects inaccurately, but we really you know, encourage folks to keep things really clean and above board. So here are some of the conditions that a individual would need to meet in order to become a CEA. So maintain high professional standards in performing energy related plan review or compliance calculations, provide energy calculations document are consistent with the plans and specifications, unbiased judgment in the performance of a work, not disclosing client information or disclosing information that's important for compliance, so forth. Compete fairly with other CEAs. You know, if you're saying that I meet all the code of ethics and you're cheating, then that's putting a bad name on our industry. So we really have minimum requirements. And then, you know, obviously we have a board of directors through Quebec, and I happen to be the current board president. I've been serving on the board for, gosh, eight years, 4 or 9 years. I don't know. I can't remember. It's been a while, but you know, we have a complaint review process. If anybody complains about your work, or if another energy consultant complains about your work, then we take it seriously and we investigate. And, you know, there may be some corrective work that needs to be done there. So don't want to elaborate too much on this. We're not a heavy stick organization. Really, our process is, hey, if somebody's complaining about it, let's look at what is the activity that somebody's doing, and let's see if we can correct that behavior, bring them back into the fold, get them back on track. So very few disciplinary actions that we do at KBEC. So now, in addition to the professional recognition of having CEA after your name, some of you may have more than just that after your name. You might be an engineer, an architect, a HERS rater, you know, there's many other accreditations and certifications that you can add, but having that CEA after your name does get some professional recognition. We reference a lot in our trainings. If you haven't realized it yet, I'm also an instructor through Energy Code ACE. You know, we teach building departments, we teach energy consultants, architects, engineers, designers, installers, and in all those classes, we bring up the CEA program as a standard for knowledge and of our energy code. So, but in addition to that, there are some other benefits about being a CEA. We have various programs here in California that require a CEA to prepare the compliance documentation. And this list is growing. It might be a little bit outdated. The California Advanced Home Program, they call it a different name now. It just came back out. It's the New Construction Performance Program. So the investor in utilities like PG&E, SoCal Edison, San Diego Gas and Electric have new construction programs. And in order to meet that program requirement, that compliance documentation must be prepared by a CEA. Whether that's a new homes program, they also have a new commercial building program that also requires a CEA. If you've ever participated or in one of the advanced energy rebuild programs, I know there was one up in Sonoma area due to all the fires up there, the devastation, and that advanced energy rebuild program was given incentive money, large amounts of money, for people to build their houses back more efficient, more than what the code required. In that case, they required that a CEA prepare that analysis and documentation. Roseville Advanced Home Programs, if you're in that area, SMUD Smart Home Program requires a CEA. We do have a few of the REACH codes that require either a CEA or have an incentive to use a CEA to get a little bit lower requirement or reach above code. So right now, I know Palo Alto and Santa Monica have in their REACH code ordinances a requirement that you're a CEA, that a CEA prepare that compliance documentation. Other jurisdictions like Hayward, Milpitas, San Jose have incentives, that meaning that your performance target above code is slightly lower if you use a CEA than if you'd used a non-CEA, assuming that the CEA is going to be more accurate. And we'll talk about the accuracy of CEAs here in just a few minutes. Get more information on that. There are tax credits available for multifamily projects. These are typically subsidized housing meaning that they're not at market rate. Developers, project owners can go and get tax credits that they can use to amortize over several years to offset their cost of doing these efficiency improvements. Again, to qualify for those programs, you have to, the compliance documentation and all the energy efficiency documentation needs to be done by a CEA. City of Santa Ana, their plans examiners require that a third-party plan check of all the non-residential projects, meaning that before you submit your plans to the City of Santa Ana, you have to consult with a CEA, and they do a review to make sure that what you documented on that certificate of compliance matches what the plans say, that you're not breaking any rules, you're meeting all the mandatory requirements, your budget is based on the correct target, and so forth. So again, it's another way to increase the overall accuracy of our compliance documentation. Department of State Architect, if you're doing any hospital work, they now require that the compliance documentation be prepared by a CEA. And then I think I already talked about the non-residential new construction incentive program. That's very similar to the residential new construction programs incentive program. So again, this is all done to increase the value of becoming a CEA, and our goal, and we're very proud of this goal, is that not only do we want our reach codes and programs to set the bar high for the folks doing the compliance documentation, but we're also looking towards moving the needle on our code requirements to have some provisions in our energy code for certain project types be required to be a certified energy analyst to prepare the compliance documentation. So it's ongoing work, and some of those steps towards becoming a CEA or AEA, Associate Energy Analyst, have been underwritten largely by our investor-owned utilities. Again, those ratepayer funds go towards improving compliance with their energy code. And because energy consultants are on the front line, they're the ones looking at the plans, the designs, they're doing the analysis. Our investor-owned utilities and other folks like 3C REN have put a very high value on that role and have invested money towards developing those knowledge, skills, and abilities to do this. So through Energy Code ACE, we have tools, training, and resources. I'd be surprised if no one here has heard of Energy Code ACE, but in case you haven't, Energy Code ACE is a website and a brand. It's not a organization. It's a group of utilities that come together to form these various free tools, training, and resources. So we also have a website, energycodeace.com. So we got lots of cool stuff there. Now, as part of the CEA program that the investor-owned utilities put a lot of money into developing the exam and the certification, there are also opportunities for folks to engage with a mentorship program. And we currently have a residential CEA mentorship program, and that is administered through KBEC. Now, there's no cost to be a mentee, go through the program, but it does require you to become a member of KBEC. So I'm not here to pitch membership in KBEC. That's not our goal, really, is to let you know what steps it takes to become a CEA. So we find that the mentorship program, which is pretty new, is really effective. Essentially, we're pairing candidates with mentors, CEAs that have been vetted and seasoned and are prepared to share their knowledge about what they do with other folks that are up and coming. So we have key interactions that are designed to help folks understand and apply this information. We also have a regular monthly call as well as required training that folks need to go through. And largely rely on Energy Code ACE trainings to satisfy all that. One of the recent success stories I had is one of my colleagues who has an energy consulting firm. I won't say who she is, but you may be able to figure it out. Also a Energy Code ACE instructor, brought on a relatively new employee, and they're geared towards doing the energy calculations. This particular employee went through a mentorship program, took the CEA exam, passed the first time, both the multiple choice and the modeling portion of the exam. So just to put that into perspective, we have about ranging right around a 70 to 75% pass rate. So it's not a cakewalk to take this exam. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about it in a few minutes. But because this person had a strong background with their mentor and going through all of the training that was prescribed and the interactions with the mentor, this person was more than equipped to not only pass the exam, but pass it with a really good pass score, and became a CEA. So the mentorship program really has a lot of value in it. So we tackle this as about a 1 year mentorship program, and we do start fresh every year. So I know our current group is going through their, a third of the way through the program, but we're going to be starting a mid-cycle mentorship program, as well as hopefully sometime next year we'll be opening our non-residential mentorship program. So
and Brian,
yeah.
do you see a few questions in the chat? And kind of building off of this topic, going back a few slides now, Katie asked, what are examples of other professional certifications that could count towards the required points, particularly for a beginner?
Yeah, that's a great question, Katie. Thanks for asking. Now, you might have, just through your education, you might have a degree, associate's, bachelor's degree. Those all count towards qualification. Other certifications would be a HERS rater, a Green Point rater. If you're a lead AP, I'm sure everybody's familiar with the LEAD program, our national program for LEAD. Other certifications would include maybe an HVAC certification from a junior college, so forth. Other building programs or labeling programs might qualify as well. So essentially what we're trying to do is assess the knowledge that somebody has and allowing people to apply those other areas of expertise towards your experience becoming a CEA. But those only account for half of those points that you need to get. The other half has to be based on you actually doing the work and showing that you have the knowledge and chops to use the performance approach. So does that help, Katie? Hopefully that helps there. And I see there was a follow-up question Claudia had. Okay.
Yeah, I'll read that.
Yeah.
So Claudia asked, to build off of what Katie said or asked, do you have any suggested ways to compensate for lack of experience in the construction industry?
Yeah, and that's a good question. And, it's that that catch-22, right? How do you get into an industry without having experience, and how do you get the experience to get in it? You don't necessarily need to be employed by another person to gain that experience. You can literally go online, register for some of the classes, take those classes. Whether you're in the mentorship program or not, you can still take the same classes. We have energy efficiency basics classes. We have classes that cover all 5 competencies, including the modeling. And you can go out and take those classes. In some cases, the the sample projects that are used in these classes can be used to demonstrate your experience with the compliance documentation. So, so I think that's a really key point, is get involved with the training and education side, understand the basics about our energy code, understand the modeling process, maybe, take some of the modeling classes and get some practical experience there. And that's really the best way to compensate for lack of, maybe you work for an architect or engineer, or you work for an energy consulting firm or somebody else involved in that compliance process. You don't have to do that. I think it's great if you have that opportunity, but in lieu of that, I would say, get into some training classes, get a better understanding of the code, and then work from there. I think it could be achieved without physically working for somebody else, gaining that industry knowledge. So is that help, Claudia? Is that?
Yeah, thanks.
Good. You're welcome. Yeah. It might be a harder route to take. It's always great to have somebody who's already paved the way for you, right? They've already gone down that road. I've been doing it most of my career. I'm 54 right now. So, 30 years of doing this, is great. And I want to transfer some of my knowledge to new folks, but I don't always have that opportunity. I think anybody with enough determination, there's plenty of information out there to gain some experience, to the point where you could, get a job working for a consulting firm or designer, architect, so forth. So hopefully that helps. I won't go too long on that, but a couple of things. I wanted to share a little bit about some of the research that I've been doing. This has been ongoing for several years now. We started in 2017. And essentially this was a research project just to see how well the program was doing. And, some of the things that I used as to develop the concept of researching the CEA program came out of a need. We just didn't know how well the project or the certification was performing. Are CEAs actually doing a more accurate job than non-CEAs? Is there value in that program? Are we just, putting a label on something that there's no difference between that and somebody who is not certified? So what we set out to achieve is, one is elevate the role of a certified energy analyst, similar to that of other certified roles in the compliance process. The HERS rater, that person needs to be trained and certified. They need to maintain, their code of ethics and maintain their knowledge of the energy code. Likewise with an acceptance test technician, that would be for non-residential projects. Those are also certified, trained individuals. We want to elevate that role of a CEA similar to those. And we would love to get requirements in our code for certain project types to require that the compliance documentation be prepared by a CEA. Those are our long-term goals. Some of our short-term goals are influencing the jurisdictions that are seeking a REACH code, seeking to develop a REACH code ordinance, a local ordinance, that they adopt that CEA standard as a minimum standard for preparing compliance documentation. So we can't do that without data. So we had to go out in the field and collect some data. Now, that data, was based on our research hypothesis, and it says compliance documentation prepared by a CEA is more accurate and complete than those prepared by non-certified energy consultants. And that's a pretty big hypothesis. So what we did is, we said, is there any evidence that supports this hypothesis? I think there was a lot of anecdotal evidence, but we didn't have any quantifiable evidence. So, and, we had to ask ourselves, can accuracy of compliance documentation even be measured? can we compare the compliance documentation from a CEA to a non-CEA and have a what's the term? An objective outcome, a measurable outcome, a difference. And then what types of sources are available for evaluating compliance documentation, and then what other barriers, research goals do we need to accomplish? So we kicked this off in 2017. We came up with a plan, a research plan, and set out to quantify this. So, and we did, for the most part. We were able to go through and collect data on 88 new construction residential projects. These are all under the 2016 code cycle. Our goal was 50% CEAs, 50% non-CEAs. We were close, but we had a third party firm do our statistical analysis of all this data. The data was collected on a blind data collection. I physically went out to various building departments. I brought an assistant with me who would first take the plans and cover up any names that might have been associated with the compliance documentation. And then we did a really thorough takeoff and evaluation of what was on the compliance documentation compared to what was on the plans. And we were able to quantify this and come up with a score of accuracy. And you can see on our chart on the right-hand side that the CEA sample group had a 90% accuracy score on average, whereas the non-CEAs, they were doing on average worse than the CEAs, 77%. So you think there's not a big difference there, right? And we're talking about what, 13%. It's not huge, but you can see that there is a quantifiable difference in overall accuracy. Well, we weren't able to statistically prove that there was a significant difference. You can see the little black bars. Those are our confidence intervals, and these are set at a 90% confidence interval, meaning that we're pretty sure that CEAs are doing a better job. There is an overlap though, so if there is an overlap that we didn't prove that it was statistically significant, we're really close. We're on the edge of proving that. We just need to collect more data. So in the lieu of collecting more data, we dug a little bit deeper. We wanted to see, okay, well, maybe on average, the total scores, we're pretty close. CEA is still doing a better job, but let's look at some very specific features. Now you can see here that when we dove down into the very specific features that were documented on that complaints form, we found a lot of statistical significance in the difference between our two groups, the CEAs and non-CEAs. And we've graphed these here on the left-hand side, individual measure accuracy. You can see where most of the CEAs are performing at a pretty high level of accuracy, in some cases even 100% accurate, whereas the non-CEAs are performing poorly, various levels. All of these have proven to be statistically significant. There were no instances where non-CEAs performed better than CEAs. That just didn't exist. So that, again, goes to show that our hypothesis is pretty darn accurate. So, and you can see these individual measures vary from the orientation of the building to various assembly and feature physical square footages or areas. Now, we also looked at the magnitude of the error, meaning that if a CEA was doing well on that, how many of those projects had 0 errors compared to the non-CEAs? And you can see that 72% of the CEA projects had 0 errors, where only 30% of the projects from non-CEAs had 0 errors, and so forth. You can see how the greater the magnitude of the error, the greater difference between the two groups. When that magnitude of the error got really high, like above 10%, 89% of the non-CEAs made that error, whereas only 11% of the CEAs made that error. So this really is significant information of our industry and how the CEAs are performing. So this information is consistent with our anecdotal evidence, asking plans examiners and building inspectors, asking other professionals in the industry what they think the differences are between the two people groups. So good. Any questions on this?
Not seeing any new
Cool.
questions right now.
All right, good. Couple other things while I'm on the slide, and I'm just reaching the end of my presentation. I was going to open up to Q&A in just a minute, but we're taking this research now a step further and quantifying, trying to quantify potential energy savings based on a certified individual. So we're using this information along with some other data we've collected from our HERS providers to quantify this on a statewide scale. We've determined that for this research window, the code cycle, the 2016 code that went from July 1st or January 1st from 2017 to December 31st, 2019, right? That was the code cycle for the 2016 code. There was roughly 200,000 new construction residential projects that were permitted. Out of those, there was roughly about 2,000 individual documentation authors, meaning that there was 2,000 people that did that 200,000 project compliance documentation. Relatively low number of folks out of that 2,000 were CEAs. So we're thinking data is coming in roughly about 5-6% of those are CEAs, but the CEAs are doing 40 to 45% of the work. So what that's leading us to is CEAs are doing more work. Maybe they're getting more work because they're a CEA. They're using the software more frequently. They're in training classes more frequently and so forth. So we're finding that not only is the program driving our industry to more accurate compliance documentation, it's also bringing in more frequency of use and experience within this realm. So it's kind of feeding itself. So we're really excited to finish up this study and to quantify some of these differences. But is there anything, that's about it as far as what I have to share today. Was there any specific questions about becoming a CEA that I could answer, or are there any other areas of that you'd like me to kind of elaborate on? I know we're kind of running down towards the end here, about 15 minutes left, but feel free to unmute yourself, ask a question, or need more info on something. Be happy to help.
Yeah, and Brian, well, maybe folks think of any final questions. I'm happy to run through some of my final slides, give folks a moment, and then we can finish up with any questions. Awesome. Yeah. Well, you folks think of any questions, any final comments, feel free to put them in the chat or save them for a moment. We can discuss with Brian. I'll run through some closing slides. I'll also, no, looks like I'm not able to do that today. So I'll run through some closing slides. We don't have learning units for this class, but if you do have questions about classes or anything else, feel free to email me. My email's on the slides there, and will be in the follow-up email. We'll have a recording of this available. And Brian, if you don't mind, I'd love to include the slide deck in that email as well, so folks can review. Awesome. So have the slides as a resource too, all the great information that Brian shared today. If you are looking to learn more about this industry, I think 3CRen can be a source for more information for those starting off, for getting an introduction to it. As you can see, we have some upcoming courses here, like our home performance course, Tools of the Trade. That might be a great introduction to learn about what some of the tools that folks are using in the field to do some of this work. Connected directly to this course, you may be ready or at that point where you're ready to take the exam. We are also hosting some of those CEA exams here on the Central Coast, and the exam prep workshops, which will be virtual. So we have opportunities to prep for a test coming up and to actually take the test later, I think in May. As well, I'll just mention we also have an on-demand training page on our website. I'll link that shortly. You can find some of the more introductory level courses like Energy Code 101, which I actually think Brian did a great job of already describing a lot of that information today. But some basics on other kind of building science principles, and that may be helpful to this work as well, or getting started on this track. So I'll stop there now. If we do have any more questions, we can discuss them now.
Yeah, I think Fred just put a question up in the chat window. He says, how often does the CEA exam take place? We try to offer a CEA exam in a Northern California location, Northern or Central California location, and a Southern California location at least once a quarter. Because this is a year preceding a new code cycle, meaning that we have a new code coming out January 1st. It'll be the 2022 code. We've increased the frequency of the CEA exams. They're not quite one a month, but at least 2 a quarter from here on out to the end of the year. And we're going to be adding more exam dates and locations as necessary. We still have a pretty good number of folks that need to recertify, meaning that they need to re-up their 2016 certification to the 2019 code cycle. So we're going to be adding exam dates, as many as necessary to get that done. So where can we find the exam information? Great question, Fred. You can go to the kbec.org website. It's cabec.org. There's a drop down called CEA program, and it has all the information there. So if you don't find it, you're welcome to email me, Brian at selbyenergyinc.com. You can reach me there. So either that or email Linda Pierce, who's our executive director of KBEC. She can give you more information on that. Good. All right. You may go to the next slide, Sean.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, conclusion slide.
Yeah, kind of our last slide. Let me just make sure I put in the link to our website too, just so y'all have that. Yeah, check out our website, more trainings there, which may be helpful to you. But beyond that, yeah, I think it was a great presentation, Brian. And I want to thank you for spending your Tuesday morning with us, sharing this information. As far as some of the more introductory, level classes explaining some of the basic concepts that kind of go into energy modeling and the energy code. I think this is one of the best that I've seen with 3CRen. So I do want to just share that, and definitely have this training be a resource to some newer folks in the field or in this path too, is really, really helpful. So thanks for sharing today.
It's my pleasure. I thank you for the opportunity. This is great to get the word out about the CEA program. It's appreciated.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you everyone for joining us this morning as well and taking time out of your day. Hope it was useful, hope it was helpful. And again, we'll share the slides and recording in a follow-up email shortly.
Great. Well, thank you, Sean.
All right. Well, with that, everyone, I'll go ahead and close the meeting and have a good rest of your day. I appreciate it so much.
All right.
Bye now.
Take care, y'all.